I'm Dan Smolen. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit, so that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolen here from What's Your Work Fit. Happy middle of October. Did you put your heat on this morning? We did. The house smells like burnt toast. Welcome to winter. I hope you all are having a good and successful day. And thank you. Thank you to everyone on this live show today and to everyone who's watching the playback. You are helping us build an enduring community around the future of work and workplace. And we cannot thank you enough for being a part of the What's Your Work Fit community. If you haven't done so already, please engage with us directly on our two platforms. We're on LinkedIn at What's Your Work Fit. We're also on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel, and you can engage with us there. One other thing I want to add, if you enjoy the content that you're absorbing here on What's Your Work Fit, I ask that you tell 5 friends to subscribe, and that's how we're going to build a community. I don't spend money on, fancy lead generation and stuff like that. The community that we're building happens through old school referrals and other types of very basic engagements. And we're not a massive community, but we are a very strong and involved one. And again, thank you so much for everything. We're now into our 3rd year of What's Your Work Fit, and the greatest of it is yet to come. So thank you very much. Okay, let's get our show started. I am so pleased to welcome back our returning guest, Ryan Anderson. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. It's really good to be back. I had a great time the last time we did this.
And it's good to see you. That was a lot of fun. That was on my birthday, May 1st. That was a big birthday present for me. So let me tell you about Ryan. Ryan is the VP of Global Research and Insights at interior design leader MillerKnoll. He is also host of the About Place podcast series, which is fantastic. If you haven't heard it, check it out. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you. I appreciate that plug. And we actually just changed the name of the team to Global Research and Planning because we're doing more around workplace strategy, design, service. These aren't things we charge for, but we like to be able to work alongside our friends in real estate and interior design to actually apply the research to plan great places. And so that way we can learn based on practice, not just theory.
Wonderful. Let's bring in our co-hosts. First off, Mark Gilbreath, the CEO of LiquidSpace. How are you today, Mark?
I'm well. Hi, friends. Good to see you both.
And also Fran Saele from MorteVita. How are you, Fran?
Great, Dan. Great to be with you and Ryan and Mark again.
The team is together. Okay, let's get at it. We have a big show today. So interestingly enough, the lead topic of our live show today actually came from a live show viewer from Ryan's first appearance back on May 1st. And he is a workplace leader who works in a design-related firm with engineers and people that do, very specialized knowledge work. He indicated that some of the people on team are neurodivergent. So he's very concerned about the topic today. And he asks you, Ryan, how can I achieve inclusive workplace design? So get us started. How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, first, what a fantastic aspiration, because it's not just the right thing to do, it's really good business. You're basically creating environments that equip a much broader range of people to be productive and hopefully retaining great talent longer. Neurodivergence is part of it. I think a really important part of it, but it goes beyond that.
Right.
In terms of how to do it, it has to do with a more participatory approach to design. So there's a couple strategies you can use, and I'm going to talk mostly about the creation of the physical workplace, but I actually think these principles apply to creating a more inclusive work culture broadly. One is to understand best practices that are happening by organizations that are trying new things and learning and are really invested in the research. And I do think there's a variety of really smart, improved practices around taking into account needs that are sometimes not right at the middle of a bell curve. Like I work with our product development teams, and the typical view within the development of a product or a space is that we've got some sort of ideal user in the middle. Well, we've learned a long time ago that sometimes somebody who's really on the edge of that bell curve, if you solve for their needs, you create a better solution for everyone. And I can give you examples of that. So that would be one approach. The second approach, which takes more work, but boy, is it the best approach, is to design with employees, not just for them, to actually get groups of employees providing input, not even necessarily on a design, but more on their work experience. For us, the go-to place to start is employee resource groups. If it happens to be a company that already has groups of employees that are organized into, this is the veterans, this is the working parents, this is the African-American professionals, like if those groups exist,
right,
they're there to be able to help advocate for unique needs. And being asked about their work experience, being asked about their experience within different sort of environments, working in the office, working from home, et cetera, often yields really interesting and very actionable insight that can provide guidance for a whole host of others. I'll give you one example. I had the privilege last month, along with our director of design strategy on my team, Joseph White, of touring some of the leading workspaces across Australia. So we were in Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. I think Australia in many ways is years ahead, in some ways less so. But we were at one organization that had hired about 30 people with autism into their cybersecurity team. People with autism are excellent at pattern recognition. And so this was a very specific hiring decision, but you have to be much more aware of the sensory needs of somebody, really anyone who's on the neurodivergent spectrum. And there really is no quote unquote neurotypical in that sense,
Right.
but they offered not just a room or two, but a whole part of the building with more variable sensory inputs. You could adjust lighting levels. You can deal with acoustics in new ways, different options as far as where to work. And as I stood there observing with Joseph, we both were like, who wouldn't want this? Like, who wouldn't want more control over lighting, acoustics, your own experience? And so it worked great for them, but it's also just a path towards better experiences for everyone.
I want to ask you what you noticed about that trip and Australia that really lit your fire. What are they doing that we here in the United States aren't doing yet or doing well?
Yeah. And we actually did cover this on a episode of our podcast about place. So thank you for the plug. But
Sure.
we recorded it before I went back. And I have more. I would say quick number of things. Sustainability and biophilic design, right? So the understanding the carbon impact of the creation and management of the facilities is well ahead of what we see elsewhere. The use of biophilic design are basically ways of bringing the outdoors in. And that's greenery, fresh air, natural light, way beyond what we typically see. The use of workplace technologies. I was actually texting Mark from Melbourne during part of my time getting his perspective on a few things, but the use of workplace technology to have a better workplace experience, but also to access flexible workspaces. It's very common for the landlords to provide access to various types of flexible workspace in the building. The landlords are also doing a lot to provide improved work experiences. There's this concept called end of trip, where you've got bike storage, showers, towel service, sometimes masseuse provided by the landlord for free to the people who are working at the tenants. These are just a few of the things. I could keep going. There's a lot more, but it's a different situation there, and the landlords are providing quite a bit in the way of incentives to the various companies working there. So if you're getting, let's just say, 30% of the total value of the lease back, either in rent abatement or in fit out, you're much more likely to invest some of that in creating a better experience. There's also some things I didn't love. They've taken the concept of activity-based working so far that while, yes, the spaces support a wide array of activity, there's less and less assigned space. It's not even necessarily assigned to teams. So that risks a major depersonalization of the space. So there's a lot going on, really cool. There's a few things that I think as they've gotten down the path, I might think that we could learn from, good and bad, but there's just nothing that beats getting on site and observing actual behaviors in real workspaces. I don't know how to do research just through surveys and remote observation. Like you really need to get on site.
That is so cool. Fran, take it away.
Yeah, Ryan, it's clear you have to be on site to see it. You can't just feel it, on a Zoom call, for sure. I'd like to pick up on your concept of discrete differences in design across a spectrum of personas doing similar work. And I think that's a fascinating subject. You want to call that quantum design? You can use that one. That's a new. I'm not
trademark on that.
I was going to ask you, but we can go to that on the way out. You said there are a lot of clients are experimenting now with some of these things in terms of trying new things. Can you give us an example or two of those specifically on some client experience that you've had? Not naming the client, but an example of how they used to do it one way. Now they're doing it two or three ways because they recognize the differences within their own organization.
Oh my goodness, we spend a couple calls talking just about this one. Yeah, I mean, the good news is that this is a time of experimentation. I don't think everybody's seeing it maybe as much as we get a chance to see it, particularly because the workplace strategists on my team are so often involved in supporting pilots. But I think there's a reevaluation of the range of activities that should be supported within an environment, recognizing that a lot of things can be done elsewhere. I think there's experimentation around different sort of work spaces and work types to see what is more useful or not. I think there's some major interesting work going on around the support of video in individual and group space. But if I had to get much more specific about what I'm finding inspiration from, particularly as it pertains to our topic today, it's finding new ways of engaging employees in a more participatory process. So I don't think we talked about this one last time I was on. I talked with this bank in Omaha, First National Bank of Omaha. They redid more than 20 floors during the pandemic, which was risky to make that kind of investment. And
wow,
they told me about a process where they simply engage their employees in more conversations about how are you working, what do you miss, what sort of experiences do you really wish were supported better. They created a kind of a mock-up area, basically, like not so much to show furniture or carpeting or whatever, but to test, like, we think this sort of space might support the work better than what we've had. And what they described to me was that basically, as they went through each floor, they do some change management and onboarding, and had very strong use of the space right out of the gate. And it sustained because it felt more participatory. It felt like while no space is perfect, that the employees knew what was going on. They understood a sincere desire to support these sort of post-pandemic work experiences better than maybe had been in the past. And I think the engagement was really, it bore a lot of fruit for them. If we get more specific, oh my goodness, I'm in New York today. I was just mentioning to someone, it's really interesting to see how many private offices we've been selling the last few years, not because companies that moved away from them are returning to them, but because the biggest categories of lease signers in recent years have been finance, insurance, legal, public sector, industries that use private offices. The evolution of private offices as screaming masculine status and hierarchy towards, no, come in. like, I want to spend a little bit of time with you. Let's connect. Let's have a one-on-one conversation. Let's fire up video. Maybe we include somebody who's not in the room. Has required an entirely different mindset around even planning a private office. So there's like macro level things and then micro level things, but I'd say they're happening, like those micro level things are happening across every part of the floor plan.
So just to follow up, this is another new thing that I just heard about. Actually, as a matter of fact, this morning, something called relationship-based work. What is that?
Yeah.
I assume you have something to do with this. So
it does. I mean, it's a framework that we just recently introduced, but I kind of hope that it's not just ours, that it's something that everyone can benefit from, and it's a complement to this idea of activity-based working. So if I just give that a moment, ABW, or activity-based work, has its roots all the way back in the 80s, and it's a design practice which is pretty common today, which is just asking the question, what activities need to be supported in this environment, and then making sure that the range of spaces in the environment can support it. It's something we do whenever we shop for a home, right? So like we might want a dining room, but if we're really smart, we'll say, what are we going to do there? We're going to eat. We're going to play cards. We might have people over for drinks. We might do a little bit of homework. Maybe we'll take. So you look at the activities and say, does the design support the activities? Here's the challenge. The activities these days can be supported a lot of different places. And so just looking at activities as a basis for workplace design isn't really enough. And through our research, and there's been a lot of recent initiatives, our work with Future Forum, our work with Dr. Nigel Oslin, Dr. Andreas Hoffbauer, but also combined with work we did well before the pandemic, it's all pointing back to relational things. The CEO wants better culture. What does that really mean? The employees are looking for their closest colleagues to spend time in ways that you can't on video, but they're also hoping to reconnect with a few other teams that they haven't seen for a while, what are known as strong ties and weak ties. We've uncovered data around the desire to have better quality time with managers and leaders, even among other leaders in physical offices. We've been exploring a concept called place attachment, which is essentially the relationship we form with places. Like if you sit at the same seat at the dinner table each night and wouldn't be happy if somebody sat in your chair is a function of what's considered place attachment. And so there's been a major detachment from offices for many years. And so relationship-based work is basically a means of saying to a leader, but also to employees, these environments can have really positive effects on all of these relationships within a company or within an organization. And that needs to be a priority for planning too. And there's good data around how people are seeking offices and administrative areas in healthcare and higher education spaces to be a place that helps them form better relationships and function as part of a broader community. And I just don't know that the design practices to date have ever fully acknowledged those or put enough science behind how this works.
Mark?
So, like I said, we introduced the concept. There's an article on MillerKnoll.com, but we're actually going around speaking and sharing about how we've changed our own approach to helping specifically to better enable this.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, Ryan. Mark, go ahead.
I jumped in with a whole extra chapter. That was the appendix to my book. Sorry, Mark.
Relationship-based workplace thinking just seems like on reflection, such the more appropriate framing for this overall discourse versus activity-based or place-based or place-first. Ryan, I think about Corinne and her forthcoming manuscript that we saw a preview of on LinkedIn
Sarah
last week, and with Sarah Escobar, and
that would be Corinne Murray.
Yes,
Corinne Murray.
Work then place. So, and it all seems like diversity and inclusion in the workplace is a people first principle. Relationship based work is people first. Not to overcomplicate things, which I'm sure I will, but now we've also got hybrid rhythms and much more agency being given to employees to dictate the schedules around where and when they might gather with colleagues for those relationship-based work moments. Question for you. As more care goes into adapting and evolving the places to support relationship-based work, and adapting the places to be more sensitive and responsive to a richer spectrum of individuals and their personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a need, or how well? I want to approach this from a consumer sort of decision standpoint. How well what's our current sort of state of readiness from a merchandising standpoint to effectively communicate to the employee consumer who's looking at an app or an internal booking tool or a calendar and trying to make the best decision about the work they need to do? And are there opportunities from a merchandising standpoint? How am I going to tell the story of a space through a digital interface to somebody who's considering a day here versus a day there?
My goodness, it's like you're listening into my internal team meetings.
Yeah?
It's a poignant question, my friend. You already got to the answer. It's about storytelling. So, as an example, my team uses a group of, I don't know, 13 or 14 thought starters on the types of spaces that we see getting more use and a little bit more demand. And where we started was to say, can we describe how a space like this could be beneficial relationally and put some of the references to our past data around it? So as an example, take a cafe setting, just like a little coffee setting. And I happen to be in our New York flagship at 251 Park Avenue South, and just beyond the enclosure I'm in is a space like that. And you'd say, well, it's a good place to have coffee and to do some email. That would be the activity view. But what does it do relationally? Well, if you're a new employee, it gives you a chance to be in that environment and hopefully make a few new friends, establish those weak ties. If you're somebody who's at a later career stage, empty nester, maybe more accomplished in your career, say a SVP of something, it gives you a chance to meet people in a more equitable kind of space. It's tough to meet somebody in a conference room when you're really high in the organization and feel like you can just sit there and socialize and bond. It could be a place where you encourage one-on-one meetings that are maybe a little less transactional, a little less, like we're doing a review, just more of a chance to have some of this. But I mean, we could do that with private offices, project rooms, team neighborhoods, and we do. And so I think the first step for anyone, and that would be true of people well outside of MillerKnoll, to make relationship-based work a thing, is to communicate the value of design in those terms. And I personally, like if I'm a principal of an interior design firm, being able to say, here's how I think this space could strengthen the health of your organizational network is way more compelling to get an investment than here's how I think we can support activities that, it could be supported at home, but we'll do it better. Maybe, we hope.
Yeah.
The other part of this, Mark, and I'm really on a tear here, is I am really, really wrapped up in this concept of place attachment right now. It started a couple of years ago. We've had this longstanding relationship with the College of Human Ecology at Cornell, and we had an intern, Lily, from there. And I said to her, Lily, when we do shared desking, people sit at the same spot. And if you go to an event, within an hour, you call it your chair. Like, what is this? Can you go talk to the faculty? And Lily came back to me not with an answer, but with a paper on place attachment that was all around this environmental psychology theory of we form relationships with these places and you need to manage those relationships. I challenged my team. I'm like, hey, if anybody has a place at the dinner table, whether you live with someone or not, like just sit somewhere else. Just tell me about like your experience there. And I should really tell my wife that I'm telling this story, but she came over to me. I was sitting in her chair, and I don't know our censorship guidelines for what's your fit, so I won't use the language she used. But she was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm just going to sit in this chair tonight." She was like, "No, go back to your chair."
Did Lily's paper or your own research does it suggest that there's something very fundamental and innate and in terms of just how we as an organism have a need maybe for safety or for nesting, or like, does it tie to those purest and most core human animalistic behavioral sort of needs? Are they
autonomy, a sense of achievement, a sense of safety? Yeah, it gets into some of that, and we've also got some separate research around that. And sorry, I'm jumping lanes here, but Dr. Michelle Osmond, who leads our research, just finished some work last year on hospitality. And it was specifically started as a project with the federal government to help with hospitality and healthcare environments. But when she took it way back to a more holistic view of hospitality beyond food, drink, accommodation, it was things like, I'm guaranteeing your safety. Like you have safety here, both physical and psychological safety. And this is a place to feel like you belong, like you can share your story. We want to know your story. And so place attachment has a lot of different layers, but my big concern is I think people are very detached from their places of work by and large. And I think some of the workplace designs are making this worse.
Ooh.
And so forget return to office. This is all about reattachment or attachment to office in ways that you don't have to sit there and force people on a weekly basis. Like you coming in enough? And it boils down to your experience with others. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Well, just in the cost of that detachment, the potential cost or erosion, whether that's productivity or engagement or a sense of belonging, perhaps unknown or out of sight, out of mind, but dangerous.
Bingo. And if we were to like just redo our dining room, or actually here's an example. If we were to not eat at home for a year, like we just had to eat out every night, and then you went back to the dining room table and maybe it was slightly reconfigured, would you have like this super strong passion about which chair, or would you be like, well, I guess we're kind of starting over here? I think that's what's happening. And I love to see the investment in improved workplaces, and it's a good investment and it can pay dividends, but there's also this little risk that you're actually further complicating the situation. So that more participatory, more inclusive way of engaging people and this ability to communicate the relational benefits of these spaces can produce something wonderful. And we are seeing it. But the risk is that if you just go do a bunch of stuff and you don't really understand what people's needs are, and you spring here's your new space. We know your needs. Here's your new space. Hope you like it. That may or may not pan out.
Right. So I want to continue this thread because I'm thinking about a neurodivergent workforce where people, you mentioned people in cybersecurity or in high engineering may not be verbal like typically abled people. So how does the thought starter process work to help liberate and motivate somebody who's perhaps neurodivergent? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I do think there's some really good established principles out there, specifically around what's known as hyper and hyposensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
And we can learn from what's been done in healthcare environments and educational environments, et cetera. But for me, there's just no better method than getting a group of people to go share their experiences with an actual space or product.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't get into product a lot, but
Right.
in 2015 or 16, we at Herman Miller created a different height adjustable table called Renew. And Brian Alexander, the designer of it, has had a lifelong passion around neurodivergence. It's personal for him. And he was one of the first designers we got to engage with our own employee resource groups. And so we have a group called Enabled that has people with a variety of physical, cognitive, sensory disabilities who provided feedback on something as simple as using a height adjustable table. And there's a lot of great adjustable tables out there. We make a bunch of them. But some of the feedback was, if it's one of those little levers with like 2 arrows, sometimes if you don't have really good eyesight, really good visual acuity, finding those arrows was tough. If it was like a gray arrow on top of a black paddle, you might not always see it. Those without fine motor skills, maybe cerebral palsy or just aging employee, couldn't always get it. But when it came to talking with those on the neurodivergent spectrum, height adjustable tables have a little bit of latency because to save power, the engines cool down. So it can take a second or two or more to actually actuate. And so that was frustrating, particularly for those with autism. And so Brian, when he worked with us, created this little paddle that it's just like a clear neoprene paddle that you can just adjust without looking at it. But we put an LED light in it so that if you touch it, the second you do it, it provides positive feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And not surprisingly, everyone wanted that. Like everyone wanted that. It's like the designer who designed the OXO Good Grips vegetable peeler for his wife who had severe arthritis. He just designed a better vegetable peeler. Like that's the one I use, but I don't have arthritis. And so those sort of experiences are really helpful. The one other example on neurodivergence that I'll bring up is we did a project that we actually talked about in this week's episode of our podcast with Dr. Wendy Ross at Jefferson Health for their autism center. And in that case, it was for the waiting area. Waiting areas in healthcare spaces suck for everybody by and large. It's like you don't really want to be near anybody. There's you're not really clear what's going on with others. There's just the whole kind of concern around safety and like a emergency department, other places. And so when it came to helping patients with autism, we'll rewind that again to sensory inputs. There were some specific things that we ended up doing as a custom product for this waiting room. One was that the actual pattern of the armrest allowed for a little bit of fidgeting. Sometimes you'll see in educational settings a little bit of Velcro underneath the work surface, just give your sense a little bit of tactile. But there's a fabric enclosure. I'm in an enclosure right now, but when the patients weighed in on that, they overwhelmingly preferred fabric with a herringbone pattern. And I'll be honest, I don't think any of us totally understood why, but again, pattern recognition is a really important sensory. So guess what? The chair now has this awesome herringbone fabric around the privacy panels. And we've shown it to a few different people, and most people are like, yeah, I'd prefer to sit in that than the average waiting room chair.
So interestingly enough, so my wife, Marcia, teaches gifted kids. Most of the kids that she teaches are neurodivergent. And you mentioned herringbone. It's a pattern. It's a recognizable pattern. She's found that some of the kids actually feel soothed by it. Isn't that amazing?
It is. It is. And like I'm doing another product plug. I'm sitting in a brand new product that we've been working on for a while called Bay, which is an enclosure. And we wanted something that was more ergonomically friendly than a phone booth. But one of the things we did is we put a lighting adjustment. So I'm adjusting, you can see it. The lighting, not just based on how I look on video, but if I'm going to come in here and do 2 hours with a spreadsheet, like that's going to affect my ability to use my device, my ability to focus over time. So a little bit of input and a little bit of control goes a really long ways. The trouble is, I think if you talk to facilities and real estate teams, they don't always know how to engage people. They're used to getting complaints. It's too dang hot, it's too cold, whatever. And so sometimes there's a hesitation. Talk to the best leaders in interior design. They often don't get paid to go do that type of employee engagement. And so we lean on more speculation and best practices. It's always better to lean on the old disability advocacy phrase, nothing about us without us. It's always best if you can just get a little deeper with the group of folks that are going to use a facility. And it's okay that they might not be the same people 5 years from now, because as we discussed, the edge of the bell curve still impacts the overall user experience in beneficial ways for almost everybody.
So I want to get to Denise Bruder's comment. Hey, Denise. So Denise is a globally recognized thought leader in relational intelligence, RQ.
Yeah, we love Denise.
We love Denise, one of my closest friends. Anyway, Denise says, how do you see the built environment improving the nature of the relationship between people at work? And can you provide an example?
Yep. I'll give you three, and I'm going to be quick about it. And I'm going to leverage the framework from Mark Grenovetter from the World of Sociology of Strong Ties, Weak Ties. So in the world of sociology, we would describe our closest people in our lives, our closest network friends, as strong ties. Friends, family, closest coworkers. Those are the people that we interact with daily, and that's how we function. And they're super important. But our extended relationships are also very important. Those are known as weak ties. So those are the people that we might not see every day, but we have a relationship with. Mark, you and I have been weak ties for more than a decade. Weak does not imply unimportant. Some sociologists prefer the term loose ties, because Granovetter's point was that they're incredibly important. So if you take a look at work, how can a facility help strong ties? Well, there are certain things that a team can do on video, and then there's certain things that a team's not going to want to do on video. A 3-hour workshop to deal with some complex issue is probably ideally done in person. If you look at relationships between teams, like I'll frequently ask people, is there another team in the organization that you should be working more closely with, but just aren't? And usually there's 5 that are responded. So physical environments have always been really good at connecting weak ties, event spaces, places of worship, bars, cafes. So offices through event spaces, cafes can be excellent at strengthening weak ties. We'd rely more on project rooms and neighborhoods for the strong ties.
Right.
Likewise, I think 14% of the 10,000 people we surveyed in Future Forum said their primary driver to come to the office was better time with management. It was even higher among managers. And so what does it look like to get people interacting that that maybe is not in the context of such a hierarchical environment? Like take away a little bit of the hierarchy, increase those kind of more equitable focus areas of focus. So those are some of the ones. If you're familiar with Robert Putnam's work, Bowling Alone, he introduced the concept of social capital, bonding and bridging social capital. Very similar. This is going to sound really weird, but I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is a battleground city and a battleground state that has a 0.7% margin right now in the election.
Right.
It is so tense politically everywhere I go. The office is someplace I know that people with different worldviews, different political beliefs are going to come together. They're going to be part of something. They're going to accomplish something together. They're going to hug when we see things that are shared achievements.
Mhm.
Like these spaces are societally really, really powerful if that's what we design them for. If this is your place to go take video calls. Video calls are important. We're having one right now. Or do emails or whatever. I don't know that the design gets as far as it should.
Fran?
Ryan, how do you survive the political commercials? I mean,
my gosh.
we're in a
Fran, it's brutal.
we're in not a swing state, and we get so many political commercials. It's crazy. But I mean,
It's brutal.
where you are, it's got to be every commercial is a political.
Every commercial. My 15-year-old son is on a movie kick right now. He wants to watch a different movie every other night. We just watched The Godfather, and a few of those streaming services still interrupt a couple times, and I'm just like, it's one ad after the other. We can't watch anything. And I was in Pittsburgh last week with our dealer Workscape there, and Pennsylvania's in the same boat. We've gotten used to it over the years because there's these states that are the epicenter of all this. But unfortunately, it's I think the best evidence suggests that rarely do these ads change a lot of people's minds. But if you don't spend on the ads, your opponents could. So they're spending billions just to try to maintain the current balance.
It's cuckoo.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I almost studied political science. I switched out of it at Michigan State.
Here's my pro tip. Go early in-person vote the first day that it's available. Here in Virginia, it was September 20th. Guess what? My wife and I aren't getting any advertising except on TV.
That's interesting.
And then spend the next month with a really, really good book.
There you go. Just turn off the inputs.
The news. Okay. So an appropriate question, maybe. With again, back in this relationship-based work theme, I guess, and a collaboration between two or more people is a big part of that. Probably the only part of it. I remember seeing once, I think it was in Forbes, and they ranked 50 or 40 different types of interactions among people by which ones were best done in person and which ones were best done virtually. And most of the virtual ones were like short little, get-togethers, tactical 1 minute or 2 minute meetings that you'd want to do that way. Other ones were, interviewing, training, that kind of thing. Do you see any trends in that breakdown between what's done best in person versus remotely? And is that changing at all over time? And if so, how does that affect the design of what you're putting in workplaces? And a follow-up question on that, when I used to be involved in office design, we would design those places for 3-5 years at least. Nobody expected anybody to come in and change anything other than maybe a panel. What is the frequency of change in your interior programs today? So 2 related questions, I guess.
Oh my gosh. Every one of your questions could be a whole episode, which I love.
It really could be. Wow.
So in 2014, when we were just from Miller, we did a project called Anatomy of Collaboration because the term collaboration was screwing us up. We made too many assumptions about what that meant, only to find that one person meant they wanted a coffee bar, another person wanted Slack. It's like, well, what does this mean? So we broke it down into a framework of activities that we've been using, and it has pretty pedestrian language. Like, are we talking about informal chatting? Are we talking about group co-creation? Are we talking about a presentation? Like, just get after, like, what is the nature of this a little bit. But I actually think we need a deeper framework. And so I'm unfamiliar with the one you referenced, but I think the more we can get after it, the better. There are some characteristics we definitely see. If it's about building or restoring broken trust, being in person, kind of like long distance relationships, being in person has huge benefits. If it's about long duration things that are just very difficult to do on video, being in person is better. If it's about finding opportunities to interact with people you have no reason to otherwise have a call or a meeting with, being in person is better. And then there's other times when being distributed and using video or asynchronous chat or other tools, Mural, is so enormously beneficial. But I am concerned about one thing. The user interface of almost all of the tools we use today. So I'm thinking Teams, I'm thinking Zoom, I'm thinking Miro, Google Docs. They tend to be optimized for the individual. So if you talk to a technologist and say collaboration, they're usually thinking you with your laptop working on something that somebody else worked on 2 hours ago. Distributed asynchronous, not co-located synchronous. And it creates, if I quote my friend Caitlin Begg, who I saw yesterday, an atomization of the individual. The technology will almost continually force us physically apart from each other. And even using a platform like this would be extremely difficult with 3 of us in a room when everybody else is on their own. So we have to find limits to when the technology, like sometimes the technology is awesome. Other times the technology really stands in the way. And even with something like Miro, if I were back in the hardware technology world, I'd be trying to come up with some sort of interactive display that's optimized to use software like that, because you can't get in front of most screens, and it's not designed to allow you to control it as a group. So I would say, Fran, the probably future trajectory that's on my mind the most is that the more we adopt new technologies to help us collaborate, in the back of our minds, we need to recognize that will usually encourage us to be by ourselves with our laptops somewhere apart from others. And the workplace can support group use of that, but it also just needs to support interactions that aren't going to be well facilitated on technology.
Even when we get to a good holographic image, same issue, or is that going to?
I think so. I mean, we've been tracking holography since 2014. The best holographic technologies to me are actually the 2D ones with really, really outstanding shadow resolution. But it is just another form of video. Really, like I'd love to see the Jedi Council interacting in the way that George Lucas thought we might. There's nothing even close to it. I used to solely focus on technology research for many years, and I'm a big believer in Gartner's hype cycle. So there's all sorts of stuff that we've been promised. Great collaborative avatar-based experiences. We're
not going to get the
real.
Star Trek room where you went in, it was blanket and everything appeared and the water was flowing.
It's not that you can't do it. It's just that the bigger tech trend that should be defining all of our conversations about workplace is consumerization. It's our consumer technologies that we bring into the room that impacts 80% of the productivity we do. So you can create some slick, amazing space. Or lately, there's been a resurgence of these banana-shaped tables with people all staring at a screen, which failed in the early release of telepresence 20 years ago. It's really not about creating that one special, unique tech experience in the office that can't be had elsewhere. It's about what's in your backpack that when you start to use it, not just the hardware, but the software, is going to create a new pattern language within the office environment. And thankfully, we've been... Herm Miller designed the first environment for the first personal computer in 1968 with Stanford. So we've been tracking this for a long time. Yeah, but I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned that the technology is just going to continue to force more individual interaction that isn't the sense of connection and belonging that people are seeking. And I'm not a Luddite. I love the tech, but somehow we got to strike a balance here.
Right. Agreed.
Well, as the tech guy in the crowd, or we're all tech people, we live in it, but as the guy that's changed his career mission to trying to bring tech to the conversation, one of the one of the themes that's most inspired us of late, and there's enormous work yet to be done, is how do we apply tech to the problem space of getting the four of us together in a room where we can set the tech aside and let the human organic experience happen. And
Yeah.
Ryan, there was a Wall Street Journal article, I think in June, that made reference to the coordination tax associated with individuals who've been given choice and freedom and hybrid rhythms. The challenge of that very thing, the challenge of deciding when and where is the appropriate time to gather.
Yeah.
How do you think about that from your vantage point, right? So, and is it a problem space worthy of tech putting some energy into?
Sure, as long as it's at a team level, and team can be an ambiguous concept, but whether it's project team, functional team, like we have a place design framework where we think about different types of space in terms of individual, group, and community. Team would just be another word for group. I think at a team level, this stuff really works. You can change work and behaviors at a team level. It's almost impossible to do it at an enterprise level. And what's happening at most organizations is just a free for all among the individuals, and you hope that a couple people kind of figure it out. But it's yeah. And this is one of the reasons why we don't use the term hybrid that much. We're not opposed to it. It's a nice phrase to describe a location policy,
right?
But like I don't use the term hybrid work, because if we were observing work, we would never be like, look, it's hybrid work. It's just somebody doing something where a couple people probably aren't there. And so those behaviors at a team level, I think, can be managed without necessarily getting into some of the ambiguity around this new terminology. But I think that the tech can be incredibly powerful. And I have seen a few examples that cause me to be really excited. It's just, of course, we got to see adoption. Yeah.
Guys, we have run out of time, which just drives me crazy.
Every time.
I think we could listen to Ryan all day. You're a gift. Thank you so much for being on the show. Hey, before you leave, I got a surprise for you. So we're going to go back to the question, what's your work fit? And how you answered it back in May of this year. So here goes. What's your work fit? So Ryan, what attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes work a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful and meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day? What's your work fit?
Well, I'm going real high level with my answer. I hope that's okay. And my answer is theory Y. So for those that know Douglas McGregor's framework, he was a social scientist that basically said organizations operate in one of two ways. Theory X organizations think employees don't really want to do their work, and the job of management is to make sure they're working. Theory Y is that organizations view that their employees want to be productive and achieve, and the job of the manager is to empower. And so my favorite moments, and I'm almost my entire career, I've been so blessed to work for organizations that are Theory Y, relate to allowing like my team members or having the people that I work for enable me to go do what we dream of doing with that kind of support. And I'm really fortunate. I've got a dream job. I work for a Theory Y organization that values insights, doesn't censor or edit what I share, but just wants to make our places better.
Now, I can't imagine that you can top that. Theory Y is very cool, but is there anything that you would add in reflection?
Yeah, well, I'll do the opposite instead of going super theoretical. Like I travel a ton. I travel almost every week. Not that I want to, but it's just the nature of the work. And I feel like everywhere I go, I hug people. Like I have friends. Like I'm in New York right now, and whenever you see people hugging, it's almost always weak ties being strengthened. Pittsburgh the week before that, Dallas the week before that, Australia. Like it is so cool to be at an organization where either our employees or our friends in the market are just like excited to spend time together. And I have a job that just requires a lot of intellectual curiosity. So all that's like just super, it gives me a lot of joy. I would not want to be in a role where I didn't get a chance to be global, but with the benefit of like friends and people that are excited to spend time globally. The last thing I'll say is when I was listening to myself just now, which is so painful, by the way, all of the big ideas have been coming from members of our team. Like the relationship-based work. One of my team members, Joseph, was listening to our podcast to one of our guests. He said he was standing on the landing of the stairs and went, "Wait, we're framing this. We should be framing this differently." Or I was listening to Michelle, who leads our research on our podcast this morning, just reminding myself of some of what she's been up to. They're really cool ideas. Like just having a bunch of really amazing people on the team who are coming up with stuff. It's just a matter of trying to amplify what they're doing, like clear the path for some of this stuff to get out there in the world and change the products we make and change the places we help to create. So, yeah, I still feel like just setting them loose on the world is probably my primary job.
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody who hasn't communicated with you or followed you before, Ryan, how would they do that? How would they find you on social media?
Yeah, LinkedIn's best. I don't use the other platforms very much, but definitely LinkedIn. I share quite a bit. I also have the benefit of writing for Forbes.com a couple times a month. So those pieces are out there are usually some of what's on the edge of what we're thinking. And then we do keep an email, insights@MillerKnoll.com, for anybody to send like whatever random question, or sometimes we'll get like a little bit of help. We don't put that out there often, but sometimes people are hesitant to contact me, but they might just be like, "Hey, we're doing some hoteling and we want to do a little bit of change readiness to make sure people don't hate this. Like, who do I ask?" Like that inbox, we look at it regularly and we'll get it to the right person.
That's wonderful. Well, I said this before, I'll say it again. I hope we can get you back on sometime in 2025 when we know what the world's going to look like. Even in Grand Rapids, we'll know what the world looks like and we can respond to the latest thought leadership that's going on out there about workplace. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah, I love joining you guys. We already know what it looks like. It's just not evenly distributed. We'll continue to figure out how to distribute the right stuff. But I enjoy our conversations as much as any I have.
Likewise.
So thanks for having me back.
Thank you.